work session, just a regularly scheduled one tonight.
Okay, so then I guess I'll just tell the folks out there that we are going to be talking about storm drainage this evening. So let's see if we have any public comments related to non-agenda items. I don't happen to see anybody in the attendees room. City Clerk, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say my computer just turned 6 o'clock. I was just going to let you know, my phone and my computer, but I don't see anybody there though.
Okay, well I've got 6:02 on mine, so maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit here.
I just turned 6.
A little anxious to get going. Just wanted to get some things out of the way before the mayor joined us. These are all just regular routine things. So
and Councillor Harrington will be just a little bit late tonight.
Okay. And I believe we got a message that Councillor Schmeckel will not be with us this evening. I think he had a travel conflict. I still don't see anybody in the attendees for public comments on non-agenda items.
I don't either, Vice Mayor. I think you're good to move forward.
Okay, nor do I see the mayor yet at this point. I've got 6:05, so we must be at about 6:03 on everybody else's. Yeah.
My phone says 6:01. My computer says 5:58. Take your pick.
What happened to that atomic clock getting us all synced at the same time? I don't know.
Well, the digital clock on the wall in chambers says 18:01. The round clock in the back says 6:05. So they don't even agree with each other in the chambers.
Okay. Well, I have to tell you, I'm really looking forward to this work session. So maybe that's part of my issue here. I'm excited about this discussion. Oh, here comes the mayor too. So we'll just let him jump in and take over. So, Mayor, I've called this to order to some extent, and I asked for public comments on non-agenda items, and we have no attendees in our waiting room, and have been that way for probably the last 5 minutes. So, I mentioned how excited I was about this work session, so I think we're just good to go and get it rolling.
Let's do that then. Thank you.
Well, Your Honorable Mayor, members of Council, Councilor Pierce, I'm also very excited about this work session. Tonight's presentation will be on stormwater management and the feasibility for funding it. Aaron Murray and Elizabeth Treadway will be presenting tonight's presentation. Both are from WSP. You may have formerly known them more as Wood. That name change just occurred last week. Same people, just different name. So when we say WSP tonight, that's who we're talking about. They're both very knowledgeable on tonight's topic, and WSP has been working with the city now for some time on our stormwater and knows our system very well and all the issues with it. Tonight's topic has been a long time in the making, with hours, or you could even say years of our both consultant and city staff time to get to where we are. As most of you are, we've been gathering the data for tonight's presentation for almost my entire career here at the city. And we were first determining the issues the city has with stormwater, and then how we need to solve it. This was done through our various stormwater studies. As an outcome of these studies, we developed a master plan a prioritized list of projects, a stormwater model, and a new stormwater sewer map. From this information and by direction of council, city staff has been working with WSP to conduct a stormwater funding feasibility study. And city staff led by Malia Brown, Chief Operating Officer, Brooks Webb, Public Works Director, and Sean Klein, Public Works Deputy Director, have spent countless hours working with WSP to answer surveys and questions on stormwater and the city's needs in it. Without this input and guidance of the entire project team, we wouldn't be able to get to where we are tonight, and I just want to thank both city staff and our consultants for all the hard work they've put into this project. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation now over to WSP and let them kind of take it from here.
Great, thanks, Eric, for the introduction. I'll introduce myself and see if I can share my screen here. As Eric said, my name is Aaron Murray. I manage the local office of WSP, formerly Wood, and that name change happened between the time we submitted our council packet and tonight, so thanks for bearing with us on that. We also have on the line Elizabeth Treadway, who is one of our national leaders within WSP in stormwater, and specifically in stormwater enterprise stormwater funding. Okay, let me know if you're able to see my screen. All right. Well, as Eric mentioned, we're going to talk about stormwater management here in Laramie, kind of the past history, what we're working on now, and the future in terms of programs and challenges. We're going to just have a brief overview of stormwater management in general, and then in particular what Laramie has been doing as far as managing stormwater and focusing on stormwater challenges and needs in terms of the cost to maintain a stormwater program, capital improvements, maintenance, that kind of thing. Then we'll go into next steps and really hope to get your feedback and discussion on this tonight. We're really excited to hear from you. So, you know, a brief history, as you know, you're probably aware, as land develops, becomes more dense, that increases the runoff and the natural system's ability to handle that runoff. Public systems are quickly developed, usually ditches and then ultimately pipe systems that are paid for through public investment or development or requirements on development. One of the interesting things in Laramie's history is in the early 1900s, Spring Creek was rerouted around the city as it used to flow more down, say, the Garfield Street or Grand Avenue right-of-way area, and was rerouted around the town, and that has had some impacts on what the creek wants to do and may do if it ever overtops Spring Creek. And ultimately, Laramie has grown into third largest city in the state. Not sure if we're overtaking Gillette or not on that, but we're up there. Stormwater management strategies over time have evolved. Before 1980, the idea was let's get the runoff into a pipe, into a ditch, get it off into the streams as fast as possible, just get it off our site. Around 1980, that started to change as flooding events occurred on those receiving streams, and the idea was, well, let's slow it down, detain it in a detention pond, typically slow it down so we decrease that rate of peak discharge. Around 1995 timeframe, stormwater quality started to be an issue with sediment and other pollutants carried in sediment start to be causing impacts on those creeks. So just slowing down the peak rate of discharge was no longer good enough, and the water quality became important. Usually that was handed down via permits, stormwater permits that put on stormwater system operators to manage the quality of their runoff. And around 2005, an approach developed to really try to mimic nature and use green solutions. And that would be, you can see on the slide, on the right-hand side is an urbanized area, and on the left-hand side, a more natural area. And in the natural area, runoff is managed through evapotranspiration, through the trees and vegetation, and by infiltration into the ground. And when it becomes developed, you lose a lot of that infiltration because it's now covered by roofs and pavement. And you also lose a lot of the evapotranspiration because we don't have as much green space. And so you end up with significantly higher runoff, often 5 times or more than you saw before the site was developed. So we're going to talk a little bit more about green infrastructure and kind of introduce that concept. You probably heard of it. It's really trying to manage stormwater closer to the source on individual lots, can be in public right of way, but try to handle it before it gets channelized and collected into a regional problem. Really try to mimic that pre-development hydrology, both in the peak rate and the volume that was discharged before it was developed. And that can take a lot of different forms depending on what type of development you have, from grass swales and rain gardens in more suburban or residential areas to things like porous pavement or green roofs in more urbanized areas. One thing to keep in mind is green infrastructure, while in some ways it is kind of a simplified approach, these are landscaped areas that are handling stormwater management, and people may not even know that they are stormwater management facilities, but they do require inspection, particularly when they are installed, and maintenance to make sure that they maintain their function. And so it can be an increased, it's a maintenance cost that needs to be accounted for as this approach is used. So as I mentioned, the gray approach is use basins, pipes, and ditches to remove pollutants from stormwater before discharge. And the green approach is more to use soil and vegetation to manage that rainwater, kind of using that stormwater, that additional runoff as a resource to create some green spaces, manage it close to where it falls so that the discharge from the site is close to what happened before the site was developed. And this can provide a lot of benefits. We like to say triple bottom line benefits. It's more sustainable and more resilient to changes. The processes that green infrastructure uses to handle runoff is infiltration, which reduces the volume. Now it's going into the ground. It's not going off site, which also removes pollutants as the soil filters it. Evapotranspiration through vegetation. Plants also uptake it directly. That removes pollutants as well. And then just filtration itself through soil and vegetation. And that's kind of demonstrated by the diagram below. If sometimes, and often we do see this in Laramie, the soils are fine grained and it may not infiltrate very fast. But you can still take advantage of filtration and have an underdrain pipe, which is shown on the bottom right side of this diagram, that allows it to be filtered and then slowly released into the storm sewer. So just a few pictures that kind of show some examples of what this looks like, and it's hard to understand some of the terms that are thrown around till you actually see them and become kind of simple concepts. But this slide shows kind of more urbanized development examples where you've got on the upper left like a tree box that allows stormwater to enter in and fill up that space before it would overtop into the stormwater system. Or in a parking lot, they've got the parking lot graded to drain into that depressed area. Can be done along the roadside. They can also be used as part of traffic calming devices, like on the bottom right, where you've got a bump out that allows stormwater runoff from the street to enter that area and be used as a traffic calming device and a stormwater management feature. This slide is other examples of in a more suburban residential setting. A lot of times it just looks like a depressed vegetated area, but typically there's a special you want to have the right type of vegetation, and there's a special soil that's used that allows infiltration, allows storage, and also allows filtration of pollutants in stormwater. But it really just looks like a nice vegetated area if it's done right. It can be done. There's an example in a median, kind of another at the end of a parking lot, where water is directed in through a curb cut, and it'll fill up that area before it would overtop and get into the conventional stormwater system. On the top is an example of instead of a detention pond, there's a sediment a forebay that then would leads into an area, vegetated area that the water has to filter in, and only when it exceeds the capacity of the infiltration would it well up and overflow out of the site. So shifting gears, kind of looking at stormwater challenges in Laramie, and Laramie is no different from other communities in the region and across the country in the challenges that you face. These pictures probably look familiar to those of us that were around on August 13th. We saw some flooding in some areas where we have seen in the past, say on Reynolds Street down in the 3rd, 4th Street area, and we saw flooding in areas where we hadn't seen it to that extent before. The picture on the left is Spring Creek flowing near its banks, but 2.75 inches fell in some parts of the city in an hour, and that presents some challenges. So, kind of summarizing the issues that need to be dealt with regarding stormwater. There's the quantity issue, which we saw in those pictures: increased flooding, rainfall volumes, and frequency are tending to increase as time goes on and rainfall patterns are changing. Urbanization contributes to that. Older developments may not have infrastructure that was designed to handle upstream development and may be undersized. Unpaved streets, as we've seen, cause problems, and both kind of a nuisance issue as we may see in West Laramie, where a lot of the streets are unpaved and there's just not a constant grade to get that water out into a stormwater system and ultimately to a creek. And then water quality, which is driven by regulatory compliance. Right now, Laramie does not have a stormwater permit, though regulatory changes have been discussed that could trigger an MS4 permit. That's a municipal separate storm sewer permit. Right now, it's only urbanized areas over 50,000 people. So Cheyenne and Casper are the only places in Wyoming that have MS4 permits right now. But there's talk that limit could be brought down, which could bring Laramie in. And the other path towards an MS4 permit is the impairment of streams can trigger the mandates like that. Right now, the town of Jackson has Flat Creek impaired through town, and they haven't been given a permit yet, but right now they're managing it through a watershed district, and hoping to avoid it through a watershed management program before they would actually get to permitted limits on their discharges. But the city of Laramie, it's not impossible that could happen. So we will talk about some of the things that you have been doing to prepare yourself for that and hopefully avoid that. So that leads into the investments and really the actions that you've already taken to address flood mitigation, system performance, and water quality. Eric mentioned the Citywide Master Drainage Study. The goals of that were to combine the 3 previous master plans that you had completed, West Laramie, North Laramie, and South Laramie. The dates of those are shown in the table below, and really get those combined into a single document so you can have one plan, one list of capital projects, and through that project to create a unified city map of the stormwater system and a citywide model of the stormwater system, and ultimately a prioritized capital improvement project list with all the costs adjusted to the same time, so you can compare them apples to apples. And as you can see, the plans varied in size and they varied in the type of modeling software used, so it was a challenge to bring them all together. So talking about the citywide map, we used conventional surveying along with some handheld devices to capture GIS data with the idea that we wanted to, for every inlet, every manhole and outfall, have information on the elevation, the location, the type of system, the diameter of pipe, what material it is, whether there's any damage to the structure and those kind of things, and get that all in one platform. So over the years, a lot of data has been collected, but from different sources with varying degrees of completeness. And so we really tried to bring that together into one coherent map. And ultimately, that map, I think that map will be valuable to your streets and utilities crews to help them map where they're having issues, where work needs to be done, where complaints have happened. Be valuable information they can use in the field. So one of the other goals was to create a citywide model of the stormwater system. So we combined the South Laramie model, and the different boundaries are shown on this map. The South Laramie model, the North Laramie model, the West Laramie model, and then portions of the city and surrounding areas that had not been modeled before were modeled and brought into the same system. So what this will allow the city to do, and there are some screenshots on the right side that shows how you can, in the model, kind of watch the stormwater ebb and flow through a pipe system. But one of the real valuable pieces of this that the city has been using already is when you do have a problem, you can go look in the model and see, okay, was it identified in the model? And in some cases it was. In some cases, like in a recent the recent flooding, we saw areas that hadn't flooded before and were kind of too fine of a problem to be captured in a citywide master plan. But the city's able to use that model to kind of telescope in, add more detail, and evaluate that problem and see how it affects downstream systems. The other aspect is when you have a development come in, the proposed development, you're able to see what their impact will be on those existing systems, what requirements should be imposed on them to make sure they don't overwhelm those systems. And it can be valuable to the developer also to help them design their stormwater management.
Can I ask a quick question before we leave that slide?
Absolutely.
Even looking at the PDF and zooming in, I couldn't read the scale on the chart on the bottom to the right. I was just wondering what that depicts.
So that is a kind of a screenshot of a certain stormwater line within the city, and it's in just hundreds of feet. These lines, vertical lines, those are manholes. So it's really about a block usually between a manhole. So this would be about a 5-block snapshot of where the water level is at a certain point in a storm event, and you can kind of hit play on the model and kind of watch as the storm comes, and you might see, this system is working great for the storm event that is being modeled. You can see the water levels within the pipe. In other storm events or in other locations, you may see this blue line start to creep up and ultimately out over the top of the manhole. Then you've got an issue. You've got water level that's going to be popping the manhole. The pipe is at capacity. No more water is going to be able to get in the inlets that are served by this pipe. And so that's really how we use the model to identify where your flooding issues are occurring, and then and then we can design improvements and rerun the model and see if those improvements brought that water surface back down below the ground and within the pipe.
Thank you. That's
Yep.
cool.
Looks like we have another question from Councilmember Cumby. Oh, Councilmember Cumby, I think we'll need you to switch your sound on for us.
Okay, there I am. I'm just curious, as you were talking, you talked about receiving complaints, from individuals when a flooding event occurs. I'm wondering if this is an important type of reporting that people should be encouraged to do. I live on Park, and for the first time in 25 years, Park Avenue flooded, 15th Street flooded, and I'm not sure that any of us on Park reported that we flooded during this last event. Is that an important part that helps feed into the data that we would ask citizens to make those reports?
Yeah, I'll take that, and I'll let Eric feel free to jump in. But from our perspective, that's very valuable. One of the things you don't get in stormwater modeling, like you would in a model of, say, your potable water distribution system. You can go measure the pressures and open up a fire hydrant and test it, and you don't get that kind of calibration opportunity in a stormwater model. And so, and we don't have flow meters, located throughout the city to measure. So really, a lot of times we do rely on some of that anecdotal evidence, or going out and see where high water marks were during the event, to help calibrate a model and help us understand if our model did not show a problem there, maybe we need to revise it, and understand what's going on there. So absolutely, that is very valuable. We often, when it starts raining, we usually in our office kind of divide and conquer and head out to the known areas where we want to see what's going on with new improvements, but we can't be everywhere, so that feedback would be really valuable.
Thank you very much.
And I'll just kind of echo Aaron that I would agree with what he said, that it is good to know where that is. Our staff in engineering, and I know other divisions as well in the city, usually kind of go out and try to find that information. And, without that information, it's hard to get out there and fix the problems because we're not seeing it all the time. So.
Great.
And I should have probably explained. So yeah, this little snapshot here actually is 22nd Street, where we've got a complicated network of ponds, with Scout Park here next to the Laramie Middle School, a pond at Reynolds, and a pond at Nighthawk. And that was a use of the model that was used to design improvements to those ponds to better utilize them. So the fourth and probably the most important output from the Citywide Drainage Master Study is a prioritized capital improvement project list. And so from each of the three previous master plans, we compiled the projects, the recommended projects, brought them up to the same time period, brought them up to the same type of costing. Maybe some master plans didn't include the cost of land or didn't account for maintenance. So we tried to bring everything up to the same level. And then we also identified new projects in the data gap areas that we added to the list, and then used this, what we call the capital improvement project prioritization tool, a spreadsheet-based tool that uses a number of factors, and it's probably difficult to read it on here, but we have the capital cost. We have what is that cost per property that it benefits? What is that cost per roadway that it prevents from flooding? Are there community recreational benefits as part of the project? For example, a park that could include a pond. Are there water quality benefits to the project? And then there's some of the things that factor against it might be, does it require land acquisition if the city does not own it, or does it require a permit through the railroad, which could be could make the project not unfeasible. Does it address existing storm flooding issues? Is it in an area where community development has been prioritized, so it may allow that development to occur? And used all those factors, and the city staff can change these weighting factors for each of these categories and see how the rankings change. So this is just kind of a snapshot, an example. We also show where the project is located by council ward and whether the project has a predecessor. If there's a project downstream that has to be constructed first, even if this is a high priority project, you may need to construct something else first to be able to have something to discharge into. And so below is a map that shows graphically high priority in red, medium in yellow, and low priority in green. This is just a snapshot. I didn't have room on the slide for the whole map, but I do have that map if we want to pull it up later. So the idea, though, this is really a tool for the city staff to use in deciding what they should program when they do have funding available. So this slide is a list of the high priority projects that were identified. There are roughly 20-ish projects. The total cost is approximately $30 million. So it's a hefty list. So these are all the red high priority projects. Some of them have been completed. This Regency Pond that's what we call the pond up by the rec center, between the rec center and the high school. And that's a key piece to protecting Spring Creek. There's some where design is already completed. Those ponds that I mentioned along 22nd Street. So 3 of those designs are completed. 1 is under construction now, and the other 2, I think, are likely next year. There's a few that are budgeted. The Labonte Park Pond improvements budgeted for FY 24 or 25. And then improvements associated with Wyoming Avenue paving improvements and constructing an outfall for West Laramie. That is under design and will be constructed next year and the following year. The city has also made investments in water quality, as we talked about, trying to be ready for and hopefully avoid a future stormwater permit. Those include that 22nd and Nighthawk Street pond optimization. That includes a water quality volume and a micro pool that is extra space. So even if it still has capacity for the flood detention, which is important, but it's extra volume provided that captures and then slowly releases over about 40 hours, which allows pollutants to settle out. Sediment is the biggest pollutant that we worry about in Laramie. At least that's what the Laramie River is impaired due to, and a lot of pollutants are attached to the sediment. So typically that's what you design for. So that pond has water quality improvements, as well as the Reynolds Pond slated for construction next year. That's at the 22nd and Reynolds. You're probably aware of the city's gutter bin pilot program. Those are shown on the bottom right. Those are proprietary devices retrofitted into existing inlets that include a filter bag to collect trash, debris, sediment. And there are, I believe, at least a couple of those in downtown inlets with plans to do a few more each year. And then there are 3 stormwater filtration manholes installed throughout the city. One over by Linford School, I think one by the 30th and Boulder, Grand and Boulder Drive. And those are special manholes that include a kind of a vortex that swirls the stormwater and with centrifuge action removes sediment before it's discharged downstream out of the system. So with that, I will hand it over to Elizabeth, who will talk a little bit about current management of the stormwater program.
Great, thanks, Aaron. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm a bit distanced from you. I'm sitting in Tennessee right at the moment. So it's great that we have technology that allows us to share our knowledge across significant distances. So one of the important things that Eric mentioned was the amount of data gathering that we did and the work that we did with staff that really focused around the details of what's done on a day-to-day basis. What are the kinds of activities across the city that are related to stormwater management? Who's involved? What effort is there? What's not getting done as well? That's as equally important. And so the key program activities that we looked at are listed here. These are, everything from how administration and finance and how the books are kept and how we can gather data on financial needs to the kind of work that Aaron just described in the master planning and system design. We spent a lot of time focused also around general operations and maintenance, and you'll see it if you've taken a look at the presentation in advance, the emphasis that we really have put in the future program thinking around the idea that maintenance and operation is a critical element within general management and the ability to improve performance of the system. So Aaron, let's take a look at a couple of other key concepts that are necessary as well, if you will move things along. Aaron mentioned the fact that we look at this work from a triple bottom line approach. We use that terminology a lot in things like sustainability and resiliency planning, but we also use it in the water business and the way that we look at stormwater management. So the investment that is made at the local level is really focused around more than the performance of the system, the investment of the physical infrastructure itself. It really is, what is the value add to this major infrastructure that you have in the city? And so we look at the issues ultimately around the economic impact. What happens if investment doesn't occur? What are the consequences of creating a sustainable future using things like green infrastructure and understanding then what's the value return to the environment? What's the value return to the community from a quality of life, from an education perspective, from a visual aesthetic? What are the things that this stormwater management program can bring to the community? And so we look in the long range analysis at how we can improve the triple bottom line value of the physical infrastructure. We also, Aaron, if you'll move the slide along there, we also delve into the kind of investment that Aaron's talking about in the construction of the capital program, what that burden is, how design occurs, how projects are cited, what kind of investments necessary from staffing perspective, so that we can understand as a part of the overall investment analysis, the elements that fall into the stormwater program development itself. And so we think this through from planning to ultimate maintenance and operation. And that leads us to some key messages that we clearly want to ensure are incorporated in programs as we work with various communities. And we've talked about green infrastructure. We've talked about its dominance really in being used today across the world, actually. It's not just something that's happened in the United States in the last 15 to 17, 18 years. It really has taken hold across the world because it's about mimicking nature's ability at the site that is to be developed or changed in redevelopment, the opportunity to allow nature to be a partner. It doesn't come without consequences. So it's important that the concepts are well understood, coordinated well with the community groups, with your internal design team, through engineering, through the development community itself, to understand why this strategy is being encouraged, or at sometimes we're seeing communities mandating the use of green infrastructure. It really is to focus on how you create that triple bottom line. How do you put in place appropriate regulatory structure and oversight through your design standards, the ability to remove barriers? So one of the things, for example, I'm working with a community in Pennsylvania that wants to use a significant amount of green infrastructure in their flood reduction program. And one barrier that we identified in their review of their program is that they prohibit the use of green infrastructure along the roadway. And yet that's a significant amount of public property that can be used, as the examples that Erin demonstrated to you, that you can incorporate high value improvements along a roadway that's both aesthetically pleasing as well as creates the opportunity to improve both the volume and the quality of the runoff that is occurring in that area. So, bottom line, education really is the key. So let's talk about what we did with staff. Thank you, Erin. Appreciate you moving me along here. One of the things that we work with staff to do is to define options. How could this significant master plan with that $135 million price tag, how could you address that while also focusing on the importance of optimizing the existing components' capacity? And so we developed with staff a basic, a medium, a high level of service, defined in terms of their staff and the engineering community's ability to work within both developing and developed properties so that the master plan projects can be completed. So you'll see there's some themes that are the real focus between the three levels of service. We start automatically with maintenance and the capacity of your public works operation to maintain what is currently a part of the drainage network and to increase the capacity to ensure that street sweeping could be handled in a way that complements the season in which it works really well and the need to keep debris, sediment buildup out of the pipe network, for example. We looked at the ability to inspect and clean the system. And so you'll see in these three different levels of service that we're investing in internal capacity, starting at the basic, adding 2 additional workers in the Public Works Streets group. In median, we add 4. In high, we add 6. We also add supporting crew leaders. We add equipment. Our goal really is to optimize the ability to use what is already in the ground from a pipe network, for example, to maximize and ensure that it stays free and clear, that you can slip line to repair rather than having to dig up and replace, so that the system itself can perform at an optimal level. And then we target as a really second primary element is the way in which a CIP investment strategy can be built. So in the basic, we're talking about the master plan projects that Aaron went over that are high priority, taking 20 years to build those. In the median, we said, no, let's look, what would it take for us to do this in 10 years? In the high level of service, we looked at what would it take to accomplish construction of the master plan high priority projects in a 5-year period. So we use these different factors in the level of service to put a price tag on what these different service levels are estimated to cost. So let's take them one by one. In the basic, Aaron, if you would, we start with the FY22 budget, and that's the platform for all three of the different analyses that we did. We looked at it from two perspectives, incorporating all the current investment that's being made in personnel and the addition of new people, the ability to provide appropriate equipment and supplies, and expanding the CIP program. So we broke it into two ways for you to look at it, taking all the current services within the general fund and adding to it these new initiatives. This is just for FY23. We did do a projection over principally a 5-year period, but you're looking at a growth from 1.6 in capital to 2 million. You're looking at a growth in direct expenses to 234,000. You're looking at an investment in personnel by a total FTE in stormwater, dedicated stormwater, at about $340,000. Those come together a little over 2.5 million. If we look at only
Ms.
the
Treadway, it
new,
looks like we have a question.
oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Aaron.
I'm sorry. We don't really have a format set up for how we're going to do
Oh,
questions.
that's okay. I can't see everybody's hand.
Can you define CIP? I know I'll hit myself in the head when I hear what it stands for, but it's not coming to me right now.
A CIP is your capital improvement program.
Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. We get so used to our jargon. We just assume everyone lives in our world. So, no, I'd rather you stop and say, wait a minute, I don't understand what that is. No, absolutely. It's your capital improvement program. But we broke out cost two ways, to show you all cost and to show you new cost based on an increase in your level of service. So under the basic, the new costs are right around $1.27 million. If we look at the median, Aaron, the median, we are expanding further the capacity to maintain, to add additional personnel for engineering services, to add additional direct expenses in equipment, the ability to improve the frequency, for example, of your street sweeping program, and a significant increase to take that ability to build the priority capital improvement projects from 20 years down to 10 years. And so you see that capital growth investment at $5 million. Again, in the green type, you see what is only new cost. It separates itself out. And there is a table that we'll look at in the end that puts all these numbers together for you. Then in the high level of service, major emphasis on maintenance and a major emphasis on your capital program. So your capital projects investment is significantly higher, moving from that 1.6 to 11 million. Your direct expenses, again, are focused around increased capacity and support for the additional personnel. The additional personnel is 9 positions that we programmed in over a 3-year period. So initial growth in FY23 with additional positions in 24 and 25, so that we are bringing that personnel cost to that 11.75 positions dedicated to stormwater. So comparatively, you can see the projection of costs on those 3 levels of service from baseline, the 1.8, to a comprehensive value, current plus new, and then new cost only. And we break those out for you because it's important in developing the policy on how you wish to add additional resources to understand whether you want to maintain your current investment through the general fund or move that resource into a different revenue, relieving the general fund of those dollars and allowing those dollars to be reallocated to another program perhaps. But these are 2 different ways that we can look at this effort. So what do we understand about how can you raise the kind of net revenue you need? In looking at the level of service and in analyzing this with staff, it's not a question of whether you need new revenue. To meet any one of those levels of service, there's additional resources that would need to be dedicated. So it's really important to ask the question, then how are these costs distributed amongst property owners in the city on a fair and equitable basis to raise sufficient revenues to meet the needs for your stormwater program? So here's how we take a look at it. A drainage fee is the question that we were asked to evaluate, whether a drainage fee was implementable, I guess is the fair word. Drainage fees have been used across the United States for 50 years to fund a major portion of a stormwater program from one community to another. They are well established. There are several thousand of these in place where drainage fees have been dedicated in a sense to pay for the important operation of your storm system. It's really typical in that it behaves very much like the way other fees for public services are instituted. I work with a community in which they have no other revenue source. Everything they do, they charge through a fee, everything. Quite unique. It's the first one I've ever really run into, but everything they do, it doesn't matter what it is, everything they do is measured by a fee. Very unique operation. It's not typical, but drainage fees are, and they're typically based on the demand for a public system measured by the degree of development on a parcel. Historically, the management of stormwater systems has been within a general fund, within the basic revenues, the mix of revenues that a community can raise. Going to a drainage fee historically, now these 50 years of experience, is that impervious area becomes the meter for the distribution of cost on a parcel by parcel basis. It is a fee. It is a fee for service. It gets charged to every property. It is not exempting any properties because they are a nonprofit, they are non-taxable. Everyone pays. So from the sense of equity, it has been well received that it's a balanced approach to being able to distribute the cost. Again, with a standard that has been historically now well-founded, has been tested in the courts, I can assure you. When I put in my own, I'm a former public works director, and when I put in my own program now 20 years ago, oh golly, how can it be? How about 30 years ago? Oh my gosh. We were sued. My community was sued. The nonprofits didn't agree that it was a fee. They lost in court. We have seen historically now the test of drainage fees across the country. So let's look at, again, in a little greater detail, how it gets established. So to generate this revenue, most importantly is to establish your local authority to do so. It's usually done by ordinance, sometimes done by resolution. It depends on the laws and structure within the jurisdiction. But it typically is established through the rights put in place through an ordinance. You establish then what a fee charge is per property, and you gather that revenue, you track its ability to meet your needs, you adjust them over time as needed, and you most importantly communicate to the community what you've achieved with those dollars. It's critical that this be transparent. The public, if you choose to go this way, that the public understands you're trying to solve problems that are important to that triple bottom line value, to the environment, to your community, to the way of life. It's that feedback loop is really important. So to set a fee, there are things that we undertake. It's not simply, we have so many parcels, here's how much money we need, divide the number of parcels into how much money we need. There's an important policy that needs to be established, such as what is the basis of the fee? How are you going to calculate that out? Some communities do a fixed charge per account, for example, as a proportion of the fee, because it's going to cover things like billing people, administration, legal support, those kinds of things, often thought of as overhead, get applied to a fixed charge per account. Not every community uses that. Some communities do. Impervious area, again, is typically the meter that's used, but it can be calculated and divided in lots of different ways. Some communities use residential equivalency. We can get into that in greater detail. That's a concept that's pretty complex, but basically what you're doing is taking all properties and equating them to how many houses does it represent on that church property. So we do an analysis of the residential properties, and then we do an equivalency to relate how many houses are represented by the amount of impervious area on that church or that gas station or that school or whatever. And also the concept of credits. Because it is a fee, it's not uncommon that communities establish a credit program that recognizes private investment on private property that improves the performance of both the runoff volume and the runoff quality to the discharge to the public system. So there's a lot of decisions to be made. We build a forecast model. We include the cost of money, for example, if debt is used. We calculate potential delinquency, bad debt, interest earnings. All those things go into the fee structure because they're components of running your stormwater program. We then calculate what the billing unit basis is for the fee, any policies on billing. Some communities bill every month, some communities bill once a quarter, some communities bill twice a year, some communities bill once a year. They bill their drainage fees out in all different ways. And then ultimately we calculate out the fee billing unit itself. And so there is a process to be followed. This is, as I say, it can get pretty complex, but I know working with your staff, clearly this is not something that would be overwhelming to understand or to be able to ultimately implement. So once we understand the rate methodology, we looked at your own community to evaluate the impervious area distribution. And we used the data that Aaron used in the modeling. So you have approximately 10,400 parcels in Laramie. It appears by initial evaluation of land use, 74% of those are residential, 26% are not. But interestingly enough, look at how impervious area is distributed. Residential is 19%, with non-residential at 81%. And the chart on the right gives you that breakdown in greater detail of what is businesses, industry, commercial, airport, all of those things are broken out in much greater detail, again, using your data. This is the kind of analysis that we would refine if you wanted to use an impervious area drainage fee basis. We'd want to look at this in much greater detail than what we did in order to prepare for this discussion with you. So once we've done that kind of work, what we really want to project to the future are basic building blocks. Finalize that prioritization schedule for your capital program. It is the significant investment that's sitting in front of you. It is the biggest financial demand that is within the overall cost and program for stormwater. We want to be sure that maintenance capacity is not just sustained, but increased. If you can optimize the performance of the investment that's already made, it's the most inexpensive approach than having to build new, reconstruct, rehabilitate, or be caught without having a system that is performing to its maximum capacity. And then in the long term, that $135 million of projects that are within the master plan, build your capital investment strategy over time. You know, you can't eat $135 million worth of investment in a year. That's not doable for any community to take on that size of investment. But what is doable? We offered 3 different ways to look at it: 20 years, 10 years, 5 years for the high priorities. But really to get your arms around what is that investment that the community is willing to make in order to really upgrade the performance of this system. So to move forward, there are a series of next steps. Eric or Malia, I don't know if you want to go through these. These are steps that we talked about that are important to make the kinds of decisions that are facing you with how to invest in this program. But really key to talking to the public. It's important that this be transparent if you want to introduce a drainage fee. It's important that there be no surprises. It works much more effectively when the community is fully aware of what you're thinking and why you have defined a need to increase your investment. And obviously it's critical that you're a part of all the education and outreach that's going on. preparing that authority to move forward. That language is important to determining how you might want to proceed in your financing strategy, building that final cost model, putting together all your policies in the appeal process, refining the way in which you can deliver a bill to a property, creating that master account file, integrating that into a system. These are very logical steps, starting with obviously the importance of outreach and education. So at this point, we'd really like to talk to you. We've provided you with a lot of information. I'm sure there are lots of questions that you have, but we're here to help.
Thank you very much. Malia Brown's joined us, and I just want to turn her.
Yeah, I would like to just, council, talk about the next steps and some of the things. I guess we wanted to give you an overview of where we're at and what was going on, and really from this work session, kind of get some feedback on where you want to go. For example, do you want to go to, because everything costs more with the public. If you want to go to a small, the basic, I think, that is less costly to the public than the high. So we kind of need some input on what your suggestions are there. I will tell you that, Elizabeth, we can bring an ordinance now if you want to just have the basic ordinance without a rate, and we can bring do the public meetings and things like that later, where you can, we'll have time to have public input, kind of come up with a methodology of how to build the rate, because there's a lot of methodologies. So if you wanted the basic ordinance to say, yeah, we're interested in the storm drainage, she's done that a lot in other cities, where they bring the ordinance to say, yes, we want to establish a storm drain, and then take the time to implement the cost and get the public involved, maybe have some other work sessions, and come back with a resolution for the actual fee structure. So that is an option for this council. If they would like us to bring that, we could. And so if you have any questions, we just would like to answer any questions. And if you have anything you would like staff to work on, please let us know.
Council, you heard it. We're in that question and feedback period. So let's start. Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Malia, do you have any idea how long the timeline might be for knowing what those rates might end up being?
I think it's going to take a little while, because we have to build a financial plan after you guys tell us which way you want to, kind of what investment you would like us to do, and we'd have to do a final cost model. We would like to go out to public meetings if I think that's important. We may want to have, ideas, or maybe we even want to understand if you want a credit policy. So there's some policy decisions that I think we need to understand from you all, and I don't know the best way to do this, but, besides that, we also have to put it into our antiquated software. Unfortunately, the utility billing software is kind of antiquated, takes a while. I think it's going to at least be 6 months, or maybe longer, depending on communication to the public for the actual rate. But like I said, we can bring the ordinances now if you're interested in the basic ordinance to establish it without a rate.
Follow up, Councilmember Harrington? No, it doesn't look like.
No, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to get a better sense of the sort of timeline on things. Following our approval, if we were to go that route. So I'm going to listen to what you all have to say, and might have more to add.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Councilmember O'Doherty.
Because I'm cheap, I'm inclined to go with the basic plan, but I also don't understand even what range of what this could possibly cost. I mean, people are already upset about property taxes being so high, so I don't know how how people afford a drainage fee, even though I know we need it because the legislature's not going to come through, but I need some kind of ballpark before I can get behind anything. Thanks.
I'm going to let Leah Brown respond to that.
Yeah. So, Councilor Doherty, through Mayor, Mayor, basically, if what we did is if you just take some simple math and, I asked for the difference in the basic, and I don't think we're going to take away general fund or fifth penny from the storm. I think we're just going to add, I think that's the basic. It's like 1.2 million if we did the basic. And you divide that by, the number of accounts, which is about 9,500. Maybe on the average, it's, let's say it's $10, but once again, per month. But once again, if you look at the commercial who has more impervious surface, it might average, that would be the average, right, for the basic per month. We don't have to go with $1 million in capital either, right? I mean, it's like $1 million in capital. I mean, we can come up with less than the basic. This is just what they put together to kind of give you some targets if when we're looking at our, top critical storm. So, I kind of agree. I think we should start with the basic, but I think it's a policy decision from the council. So, if you look at that, that's probably around where it would be at the basic, and we would have to work out some, if you want credits and, what type of instead of a fixed cost, impervious surface and meter charge she brought up where, does someone like Walmart who might have more impervious surface or bigger place pay more because the drainage is the way it's working versus someone as a residential? Maybe it's only a 2-tier. There's a lot of ways to do rates, and Elizabeth has a lot of knowledge on how we do the rates, but we kind of wanted to have some conversation with council before we start developing rates and doing a financial plan. And, what kind of communication do you want with the public and involvement?
A follow-up before I move on to questions. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Councilmember Schuster. I wanted to give Molly Brown a chance to respond to that before I move on to the next question, but you're up, Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you very much. I see that our next time we can have a 5th Tuesday is November, and I have no idea because November is a terrible hard month to schedule anything since we have holidays and everything else in it. That I would really love that the public could talk to us on a 5th Tuesday, but I see that that's going to be basically probably impossible this year because it's just not in the books. So I'd really like to hear something from the public, but it's going to be really tough. Thank you. I would basic would be my vote, and I'm going to have to see what the public tells me too, because I'm sure going to be a lot of comments. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I want to just quickly add something to that. Given the timeline that was shared with us of a minimum 6 months, and I think I heard you correctly, right, Director Brown, 6 months at a minimum, probably depending on what we go. I think we need to be really, really deliberate. Thank you. I think we need to be really, really deliberate and really, really thorough with the public input gathering process on this. And I think we actually have time to do that. But I want to touch on that a little bit later about some possible methods for that. Councilmember Gabriel.
Thanks, Mayor. Malia, I was just curious, kind of piggybacking on what Councilor Doherty had to say about, the public and property taxes and all this kind of stuff that they're obligated to pay. Prioritizing what the city needs to do and putting that all together and then looking at other funding sources. Could you address maybe some of those items about funding sources and then a priority list?
Yes, Councilor Gabriel, through you, Mayor. Basically, I think that's what we did in this presentation. I mean, they have done a capitalization priority schedule based on the 3 studies and looking at that. And I think that Aaron Murray and worked with engineering to do a prioritization of our capital. I think what we haven't done is really looked at our maintenance as well as we should. And I think we can get a lot of bang for our buck. I mean, we did order a truck to help camera the storm. And I think having full-time people full of routes and everything. And so, you know, you're not getting the flow for what you need or doing more street sweeping. And I think that we came out of here thinking that we probably could be doing more maintenance and that it's really important and it's not just about capital. And I think I learned a lot from going through this process that our dedication to the maintenance piece might really have a real significant factor on our storm. Did that answer your question, Councilor Gabriel?
Yes, Malia, I was just curious, that sounds good. What about other funding sources for wastewater and so on, or for drainage? Is it
yeah.
only,
So,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Councilor Gabriel, through you, Mayor. You know, right now we have, you know, our maintenance and streets and storm, and we fund it a lot through the general fund. And we also, you guys had the fifth penny, and the fifth penny for streets was also for storm. So a lot of money is coming through the fifth penny. You know, Wyoming and different things that we're doing have come through the fifth penny or the general fund. There's not that much funding grant-wise for, you know, that we see for storm. We are going for ARPA money. We're hoping that on the next round of 50K, we're going for some of the projects where when they define it, they haven't defined the extra 50K. It was just water and wastewater the first round. So when we get to the second round, we have already identified some of the storm drainage, optimist drainage we're going to submit, and some other stuff on the drainage for that. But basically, you know, so really the only reason is this is where we stand right now. This is the funding. It's hard to fund storm. If we wanted to do a small drainage fee or a basic drainage fee, this would help augment some of those costs and some of the maintenance that I think we really need to start.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Somerville.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I want to agree with my fellow councilors that the public input into this is going to be really important. And I don't know if there's ever a good time to do this, but the timing is unfortunate in terms of, you know, continuing to look at our water rates and property taxes and other things that people are dealing with right now. That being said, I personally tend to want to drift towards the mid-grade, I guess I'll call it, plan in infrastructure investment, just because I have some ongoing concerns. We're starting to see more and more of these, you know, 100-year or 500-year events coming through, and certainly not making the appropriate investments could cost the city and its residents substantially down the line. So I tend to want to try to move it along as fast as we can. I think my last comment would be, I agree with Councilor Doherty. It is hard to have a conversation with the public and residents without being able to demonstrate the financial investment that may be required by them. This is a complex subject, and so I think my preference would be to develop some rate scenarios to bring back to the council, and then maybe have the council refine those and then go out to the public for some comment and some thoughts on that. And I don't know what the timeline would be on that, but I think if we go out to the public with just these general ideas, the feedback we get might not be very helpful 6 months down the road when we're trying to pass an ordinance. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Pierce.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things, you know, to make really clear here. This is something we absolutely have to do. We're in a situation where this needs to get done. So if we go ordinance first or rate or public, input, whatever we come up with as a plan, we just have to do it. I'm not really too concerned about the order of things so much. The other thing, and I think I have a tendency here to agree with Councilor Somerville, is I think we try really hard to target for that mid range, mostly because what has kind of me during this presentation has to do with compliance and regulation and potential things coming down the road, and some of those unforeseen or non-predictable situations. So I think we need to keep that in mind based on what could be coming down the road and in our direction. So I think that's worthwhile. But other than that, I don't really have anything to add other than this is something we must do. That's not it's not a question of should we. It's a question of let's just get this done and let's inform the public, and we're just going to have to kind of do it. Unfortunately, I mean, we're in a situation where we keep getting cut less. I mean, the state keeps giving us less money, and our expenses keep rising. And frankly, we don't have much of a choice. We have to provide these services, and it is what it is. And none of us really like it, obviously, but it's the reality that we're living in. So we have to do it. Unless we all want our basements flooded, no matter where we live, and things backing up all over town. We have to do this. And Malia and the other folks that have joined us. I mean, I really appreciate the maintenance side of things. Side of the conversation. I hadn't personally thought about that all that much, and I think there's a lot to be said about that as well. So I just want to thank the folks that came here and presented, Elizabeth and Erin, and I can only imagine how difficult it was to pull all those different reports together and come up with something a little more explainable and very few slides. So I really appreciate that. So thank you, and that's it from me.
Thank you, Councilmember Cumby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Though this may seem like a difficult time to introduce this because of inflation, taxes, water fees, etc., I think also if we look at it, it's a very good time to introduce it, in that our community, along with communities around us, communities in our nation and in the world, have experienced flooding that is unprecedented. And so I think this is very forward thinking. And I'm interested also in the potential impact that so-called credits might have. And I'm wondering, would credits be a person going to Xeriscape? Would it be planting 2 or 3 trees in your yard? I mean, are there things that the greening of the town would then bring down one's cost and things like that? So I'm wondering if this program would also encourage a greening effect, as well as potentially help to control flooding in the future. Thank you.
Certainly.
Mayor, Councilor Comfy, through you, I'd like to throw that to Elizabeth. So that's what I was just going to say.
Thank you, Director Brown. I saw that that Elizabeth had the hand up there and wanted to weigh in on that. So please go ahead and thank you.
Sure. Credits are obviously a financial tool that is used to encourage certain behaviors. and to reward. And, you know, to someone who has to pay a bill, that's probably not really seen as a reward, but to recognize, perhaps a better word, that there are private investments that are made. And so when we look at a credit policy with a community, we really focus on what are the high value things that will truly lead to an improvement in the system. So there are things that individuals may wish to do that have very minimal impact. But there are indeed things that are a bit challenging, but homeowners and businesses are willing to step up. You saw the array of the kinds of things that Aaron showed. Those smaller improvements, an infiltration trench, something that is a tree canopy program. We're working with a community right now where tree canopies are being inventoried, and they're really expanding the use of native trees for uptake of stormwater, both along public right-of-ways as well as a part of their credit program for individuals who are willing to place trees on their own property. So there are lots of different tools that credit programs can encourage. You want a balance between what is purposeful to protect the system and what makes somebody feel good. I mean, there is a balance. You can't do everything that, you know, someone puts in a rain barrel and they want a credit for it. That's pretty untenable to figure out the financial impact of that. But if they're willing to put in porous pavers instead of, perhaps they have a concrete driveway or something, and they're willing to invest in porous pavers. Those kinds of things are that partnership that we talked about in that triple bottom line of how the community comes together with the program to really encourage, and the credit program is a part of that mix of tools that really reinforces certain behaviors that you want. Does that help, councilperson? Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for that. Malia, did you want to add anything to that part of the answer, or should we keep going with questions?
No, just keep going.
All right. Council members, anybody else for questions first time? Questions and comments for the first time? Okay, I'll go to you in a second, Councilor Harrington. Can I share some observations and ask a question of my own first, though? I'm listening here, and I really appreciate the comments. I wish that we had an additional slide right now, which is the one that the city manager typically shares with us once a year, which I'll remind you all about. It's the graph where the infrastructure funding requirements and the revenue diverge like this in a way that is not favorable to the city. I really wish we had that graph right now, because I think we all need a refresher on that as I hear the slight edge of panic in the council members' voices about talking about the need for this. But remember this graph, because that should panic you more. I think this has been outlined as a need citywide by residents in nearly every neighborhood in town, that we have drainage issues. We could go through all the neighborhoods, but I think you all know it pretty well. They're in every ward, they're in every neighborhood in town. It's been identified as a problem for many years. So I don't think this is a discussion about the question of need. I really don't. And I also just want to bring up that I think we all understand, both based on our own community's experiences, that a policy of deferred maintenance is a policy that essentially asks for greater expenses down the road, and if we're unlucky, serious disruptions. I think about our neighbor community to the west, who have been struggling mightily with the impacts of that type of challenge, and they didn't deserve it and they didn't need it, but they have to deal with it. and we have to deal with it as well. So it seems to me that being proactive as opposed to reactive is probably a better plan. I don't think there's going to be a good time for this program in terms of implementation of a fee. In terms of our residents, there is not going to be a good time for this program. In terms of the infrastructure needs, I think the best time was yesterday, and I think our staff will probably confirm that for us. Speaking to the question of the state funding, I monitored this program pretty carefully when the legislation was working its way through the legislature, which I think was about 2 years ago, coming up on 3 years ago. And one of the arguments that really carried this for the legislature was, and their authorization of municipalities to implement this program is because there's unlikely to be funds available from state sources or other sources over the long term, other than those that are generated locally. Now, we might be able to pursue, as the director pointed out to us, some funding pools that are available now, but those in terms of city planning are short term. And I know that the staff will work with us to take the best advantage of those that we can, but they're not the long-term solution. So obviously we'll pursue those. I think that's safe to say, but the long-term solution is unlikely to come from anywhere other than what we can generate locally. Now the other thing I'd say is I think most of us would support, if not all 9 members of the council, believe that our staff almost always pursues the goal of minimum cost to residents when we're talking about fees for services. I think, we may have to visit them on a biannual basis more often than we might like, but I think the goal is to always to hold those to a minimum. I don't know that we always receive acknowledgement about that as a city government, but I think the facts support that. As far as this public outreach question goes, and I don't know who wants to answer this question, so whoever feels like they want to should. I wonder if we can use some of our public outreach tools that we've been using lately, and some new pilot programs for public outreach that we've been utilizing lately to help gather some feedback about this. I'm thinking about our survey group that we've worked with recently, and some other tools we might use to explore public opinions about this. And especially with respect to those things like the incentive programs that we might use for credits and things like that. I think when we have this conversation with residents, those things always need to be paired with it. The fact that we might be able to do some credits, and the fact that we might be able to work with folks around some of the incentive programs that we could maybe roll into this. I'm not sure how that would work with our, as Director Brown says, our antiquated software that we're still challenged with using here, but we also are willing to be creative, especially when it comes to try to hold down fees and fee costs for our residents. But I think we always need to pair that with this discussion about implementing this program. So I think we should do that. And my question is how maybe we can use some of our developing and our new public outreach efforts to maybe gather that information that we've heard the council so interested in doing, getting that feedback that way. So that's my question. And then you already heard my observations, and I thank you all for your patience with all of that. I'm going to go back to Councilmember Harrington for a second time on this.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks for the second time. So my opinion swung a little bit in the middle of all of these conversations, listening to you all speak, but I think I've settled on a very similar position to Councilor Somerville. I think we aim, my take would be aim to the middle. I don't think these problems get lesser over time, and there is sort of an immediate need for us to be funding these projects in a sort of sustainable way. And then, so I guess maybe that would be the most frank way I could say my opinion on the direction we head with this. I also share Councilor Somerville's curiosity about that price, because I think the public comment that we're all going to receive is, we can talk about this all day. The members of the public are going to simply ask, but how much does it cost, over and over again? That's going to be their big consideration in a lot of ways. And then I think largely trust us to do policy that manages the city well. So, I think that would be important. And then I think maybe we need to consider how we, I think when you look at those impervious surfaces, the thing that occurred to me first was the relationship between our city code and its requirements for impervious surfaces to be installed as a part of a development, and the relationship between sort of that piece of code and then how much of that surface ends up being impervious at the end of the development. So I don't know whether that is a, I don't know which way that polls on our decision here. I don't know if that's a conversation about how much impervious surface we require under the code, or if that's a credits scenario or an increased fee, but it does strike me as potentially problematic that we require a considerable investment by a developer for a commercial property in impervious surfaces and then charge them more for those impervious surfaces because it creates problems in our other systems. So I do think that there's some contemplation that needs to happen around that topic as well. And I don't know that that's a necessarily go to the public and see what they think, but I do think that that's a conversation the council should have. And I guess that's probably all I need to say at this point, Mayor. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. And we'll do another round if people have another comment or question. No worries. Councilmember O'Doherty.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm going to need time to digest. I can't absorb this information and then come up with without having time to really examine. But I have to say I spend a lot of time cleaning out storm drain, the grates over storm drains because I'm trying to get water to flow from my house or from my sister's house, and a lot of the times it's exactly the leaves that are the problems. So and it's a very icy environment. It sounds like Aaron lives here near me, but porous pavers when you're trying to shovel a driveway and it's icy. It's a place for ice. So I don't think a one size fits all like what would work for credits. We have to be really conscious of our kind of like one tree on the south side of a street can cause that whole street. One fir tree on the south side of the street can cause that whole street to remain icy all winter long. So the nuances, but it really worries me about all of the things that go into this. I'll throw that out there. Thanks.
I think that's fair. I'm going to tease the two previous speakers, Councilmember Harrington and Councilmember O'Doherty. I think what we've heard as the solutions is to get rid of pavement and cut down the trees, and that'll help us with our drainage issue. I don't think they really think that, and I think we realize that's not an option. Other questions or comments? Councilmember O'Doherty brings up a great point, which is that there's plenty here to talk about, and I also think I heard the staff and the consultants say at this point we're still at a juncture where we're talking about how we want to move forward, and I think the council was presented with options. Do we want to do some more information and fact gathering and communication? And I think I'm getting that feedback from the council. We're also presented with, do we want to get an ordinance put together, or do we want to do the first choice, which is to maybe move forward? And I kind of think that what the council's saying is that the comfort level with this is going to go up if we've done some more research. And I wonder too if the staff might not feel the same way, because some of that input might guide how we want to structure an ordinance. Other comments? Other feedback from staff? Anything else staff folks or our consultants think we should be considering before we revisit this topic? Probably at a future work session is where it seems to be landing right now. Please, council, shake your head or throw in here if I'm not getting this right. But I think that's where we're at with this work session, is we want probably some more time and probably taking another work session to probably talk about what is eventually going to be in an ordinance. I think that's where we're landing, but let's see if there's any other. Yeah, Director Brown, go ahead, please. If that was your hand.
Mayor, Yeah, that was Mayor and Council. I think what we're just trying to get is you know, it takes a while to understand the financial plan and putting a. That's what I heard is like probably the highs out, but maybe we could do a financial model of medium and smaller. You know, I think we could come back on what we think the rate should be. So you at least maybe feel comfortable with that. And we could start that process if you want to do that. I think we were just trying to get, you know, like I said, there is some global ordinances that are not very specific, but it says, hey, we want to start a storm drainage so that people understand, yeah, I want a storm drainage now, and we're going to wait for how it's calculated, what we're doing. There are things there, and we just want to throw that out. So we could start that process. Then we could come back for another, and once we get that done, it might take a while, but we could come back then and have another work session and give some input. And maybe Elizabeth can give some ideas on credits and some programs, you know, with you all first. And then if you want to go do some survey or, you know, I guess I just didn't want to have a rate go in and it just is at a work session for me, because I didn't want it utility billing going, what's this about and why are we doing it? I wanted some public education or input or things like that. So, because this is a brand new fee and I just want them to understand what the fee's about, what the purpose is. Like, then they would have that, and I think it would be easier on rolling this out with utility billing and some of the people that have to support what's going on in the bill. And our system is antiquated. Unfortunately, we're just doing financials first, and utility billing is like 2-3 years later, because we're doing financials right now. And so it is not flexible, if that makes sense, compared to what it can be when we get a new software. So that kind of puts a damper on how the fee can handle and what we can do also. So unfortunately, until we can get to the new software. But that would be my recommendation is we can maybe do two types of, you know, rates for you. So you're comfortable between the basic and the medium, and we could put the higher level together and then strip out some of the financial model for the lower level if you want to do that.
Yeah, I think maybe seeing those two figures would be good. And it sounds like although we all understand there's an infrastructure need, revenue need here, we also, the staff I'm hearing, council is saying, yeah, taking time, getting the info out there and the feedback is the right way to go. I think they're agreeing here. Councilmember Schuster.
Thank you very much. That is exactly what I'm talking about. We heard kind of that the low end model would be somewhere around $10. So it seems like the medium grade was kind of almost double the amount. So if someone asks us, we can tell them, because this is going to be published in the paper in the next couple of days. I know it is. So saying between the low and the medium, it could be somewhere between $10, $15, $20 that people have to understand. That's what will come on their monthly utility billing. And I realize we said that a Walmart might pay more, and someone that has only a smaller lot, which we call a small lot, is going to be a little bit less, because I realize we're probably going to go by size. That's just a guess, that the bigger the lot, the bigger the fee. So I'm just trying to get out there when somebody sees this article and asks me a question, I'm just trying to be able to give them a logical answer. Thank you.
I'm going to add to that too. There is no figure proposed right now. I think Councilor Schuster's right. It may end up around there, but there is no figure proposed right now because we want to take some more time, and this council wants to see those dollar amounts at a work session or a future meeting before we go too much further down the road. And I know that's what the council member was trying to communicate. Yeah, Director Brown, and then I'll go to you, Ms. Treadway, in just a second.
Yeah. Yes, Mayor, in response to Councilor Schuster's comment, I just want to say this was just a average, and it was just an estimate based on cost. We have not built a rate, know how to do the rate, what's the best, how to do the rate. So I don't really want it published to say, hey, we're doing a rate for, we're not doing a rate. We haven't even started the rate analysis. We don't know what the costs will build and what we're doing. So, I did that for you all to kind of get kind of a peek of what we think it may be, but I don't think it's even relative to what's going on, because there's a lot to building the rate and really understanding how we're going to make the rate with the public. So maybe Elizabeth can expound on that. So that's good.
Go ahead, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to point out that what we presented was 3 different approaches, as if they had walls around them, as if they were not building off each other, or that they were in absolute terms. And that was a way in which we could get the foundation of the conversation started. What normally happens when I model out a program such as yours that does have a very significant out-year potential for the kind of investment that's needed, is that we build it over time. Okay? So it's not an all or nothing. It's not it has to be basic and we're just going to live with that. It's working with you on what is a reasonable progression of growth. What is a policy that you would want to establish on the stability of the fee itself? Are you willing to review it on a biannual basis? Do you want it to maintain stability for 5 years? Do you want it to float with demand for revenue? There are so many important conversations that really influence how we could build the strategy over time. So I didn't want you to see those 3 levels of service as if you have to choose one. It's that we would blend those into what could be accomplished on an annual basis. So if you could suddenly turn on dollars today, $5 million gets put in the hand of staff. Their ability to respond quickly to spend that level of revenue doesn't exist right at the moment. They need to be able to build up that capacity, whether it's investment in maintenance, whether it's engineering support for capital projects, that it's not a 1-year kind of, we can just turn on the spigot and there's a whole lot of money coming in. So I want you to think about this as a progression of growth and an ultimate end target. So is it in 5 years we want to be able to be at that sort of medium level? Is it 3 years? Is it 10 years and we want to be at the high level in 10 years? And we're willing to invest periodically, review rates periodically, and grow ourselves to the capacity to handle that kind of program. Those are the kinds of conversations that we would want to follow up with staff first, and then ultimately present you with the options we think are viable.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that sort of holistic summary. Other questions or comments here? Public comment? I'm gonna open it for public comment, see if there's any public comment. Doesn't look like it. All right. Well, I want to say thank you to Erin Murray and Elizabeth Treadway for joining us and really helping us with these questions and that presentation. That was really helpful. I want to suggest that that revenue stream graph that I always like to talk about be appended to that online, because I want people to understand that. I want to say this. I acknowledge that for many good reasons, we're not quite ready for an ordinance level implementing and setting a fee. But I'm going to get out my crystal ball that I don't really have and say, it's going to happen. The needs that require this and the reason this is going to be put in place in communities across the state is because those needs aren't going to go away. And unless we get a long-term funding stream structure to address stormwater drainage infrastructure problems, then they're not going to get dealt with, and residents across the community will pay the price for it sooner or later. So I think it's safe to say that it's going to need to happen. How it happens and how we approach it and choose to address it, those are things that we have time and can work our will on in terms of what it's going to look like and what it's going to cost. But the idea of whether or not it's going to happen, that isn't a question in my mind. And it's because it's driven by an actual physical need in the infrastructure. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, and if I could just add, and we can't push it down the road any longer. It's just got to get done. It's just that simple.
I fully agree. I fully agree. And I think what's going to maybe help with that is the public outreach piece. I'd like to get information about all the infrastructure failures that are a result of not having investments into these infrastructure streams, and have those always coupled with, well, why are we doing this? Well, here's why. Because you don't want to rely on bottled water for weeks at a time in your community because we had a catastrophic failure, things of that nature. Because that might sound like a scare tactic. It's just a reality based on the facts of physical pipes and the need to deal with that stormwater drainage. We have parts of our community that don't like the streets filling up with water and the mud that's created, and who would like it? But again, it's because there's a system that needs upgrades and to be put in place. Okay, soapbox over with that. I think we all get it. It's a matter of communication and making the case for why it's needed and then deciding the best way to do it. But I appreciate this presentation. Do we have anything else on this before we move forward? And again, thank you so much. And I think we're going to have some future conversations about this. I think that's another thing that there isn't a lot of question about. So many thanks. Thanks for that presentation and for joining us. All right. Okay, well, we have an agenda review. Oh, yes, thank you very much. We've got an agenda review. It's not a particularly complicated agenda, but I'd love for council to take a quick look at it and ask any questions they have about it before we close our work session. Questions on the agenda review, or we've got our usual consent and regular agenda items. I won't skip updates. I'm sorry, I just kind of went out of order there.
Here, I just had a question on.
Yeah.
9G in the consent agenda concerning the Laramie tie plan, if anybody could answer that.
9G tie plan, lease agreement. Yeah, okay.
Mr. Mayor, if city manager's on the call still, she might be able to answer that. I have not seen agenda materials for that one yet, so I'm not 100% sure.
Vice Mayor Pierce, do you have something on that? Or are you ready?
Well, for one thing, our friend Judy Snook had her hand up during a possible question time. That's one thing I need to add, and I don't know if she still has a question.
When I went to public comment, I did not see Judy Snook's hand up, and I waited for a moment. So I apologize if I missed her.
Yeah, and the second thing is, for some reason, I'm not able to get my video to work because according to the message I get, it says you cannot start your video because of the host or something. But now it's telling me I can.
Well,
Which is-
see, there you go. All right.
Okay.
But I don't
So
want to
here I
get,
am.
thank you, Vice Mayor. I don't want to get too out of whack here. So I'm going to let, I think we need to address Councilmember Gabriel's question. Then I'll go back to Judy, who apparently I missed before. And I don't like to do that, so I apologize. So do we have, I think the city manager is here to answer Councilor Gabriel's question. Thank you all for your patience. City manager?
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Yes, so this is really just a renewal and extension of the agreement the city has had in place for many, many years on the old tie plant remediation site, where our green belt navigates through that area as you traverse through, I would say, from the West Laramie Business Park, just off of Adams Street, down through the treed area that is part of the remediation site along the river.
Thank you. Councilmember Gabriel, it's lease renewal. Good.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Other questions on the agenda? How about updates? Oh, how about Judy Snow? Whose hand is not up. But there she is. Go ahead if you have anything. I don't know.
Now I'm unmuted, I think.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you very much. My question, it really isn't a question, it's a comment. I hope that in the process of all this evaluation, the public is made aware of how much extra cost this last storm cost the city. I think that would be quite educational for all of our residents, and it might help to persuade people that we in fact do need to do more. And that's all I have to say. So thank you.
Yeah, that was a comment worth waiting for. You know, what I think is that when people hear stuff like that from people that don't work for the city and don't serve on the city council, it goes miles further. Whether I like it or not, that's just the reality. So those people that had flooding and other issues like that came along with that last storm, if you think that this is for maybe anybody that watches this later from the boomerang, if you think storm drainage is a priority, talk to your neighbors about it, because we all think it is. All right, how about some other questions or comments on the agenda? All right, how about updates? And then if you remember your questions about the agenda, we'll do that too. Updates, if anybody has any. I have a feeling that, oh, okay, Councilmember Gabriel.
Attended the tourism board meeting last week. We have a really good board. Everybody, most generally, 7 board members always attend, and they just are doing a heck of a job. We are down 12% in lodging tax fees as compared to August of last year. And other than that, the tourism board's getting ready for some winter promotions, and they're doing, the staff and the board are both doing a really outstanding job, I think. We had a team building event. I think Assistant City Manager Todd called it team building yesterday at the Laramie Rec Center. Did some cleanup, pulled some weeds, and distributed some mulch around the areas, and we really had a good time. A lot of people from the city showed up, and I was glad to be a part of it. And I thank Todd and all the staff members who showed up. Made the rec center outside look just a little bit better. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Other updates, Councilmember Harrington.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just really quickly, the Pilot Hill Board is hosting a celebration, really just a way of thanking the community for their efforts in acquiring the Pilot Hill lands. That is this Friday, the 30th, from 6 to 9:30 at the Alice Hardy Stevens Center. You can grab tickets online if you're interested.
Great, thank you. All right. Anything else? Updates, comments, or agenda questions? Good work session, everyone. Mixture of unpleasant factual information that we've got to deal with. You signed up for it, right? All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.